Global Capability Centers, or GCCs, have today become the flagship of the Indian technology industry. We reported recently that in the last fiscal year, for the first time, GCCs hired more people than even the IT services segment, which traditionally has been the biggest hirer in Indian tech. Given the position GCCs have acquired, we thought we should look at how GCCs are addressing the issue of diversity and how they can build the next generation of women leaders. This is all the more important because GCCs serve as critical hubs for delivering services and innovation to their parent organizations. And diverse leadership within these centers is crucial for global competitiveness and innovation. So, welcome to this Times Techies webinar. I am Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. The two of us will moderate this discussion. And we have with us a great panel of women leaders from GCCs. We have with us Veda Persad. Veda is country lead executive for India for Northern Trust. Northern Trust is an American financial services company headquartered in Chicago and caters to corporations, institutional investors, and ultra high net worth individuals. Veda joined Northern Trust in 2004 and has since held a number of roles within the company, including Canada Chief Risk Officer, Global Head of Control for Income and International Tax, and Global Services APAC Operations Practice Executive. In her current role, Veda is responsible for resiliency, statutory compliance, and the talent strategy to enable business priorities of Northern Trust. Veda has been recognized among the top 100 executive allies by LGBT Great and is a passionate advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome, Veda.
Thank you.
We have Lalitha Indrakanti. Lalitha is the CEO of Jaguar Land Rover Technology and Business Services India. Her professional career has centered around strategic delivery for consulting, advisory, IT services, digital transformation, and global capability centers. She has worked at companies like IBM and SAP. More recently, she was the global business operations for Inca Group across US, China, Poland, Sweden, the Netherlands, and India. Inca is the company that runs most IKEA stores. Lalitha has also been the MD and country leader for Cargill Business Services India. In her current role, Lalitha is responsible for steering the strategic vision, business enablement, transformation of the operations of Jaguar Land Rover Technology and Business Services India, and build niche capabilities and solutions across enterprise functions. Welcome, Lalitha.
Thank you, Shilpa.
And we have with us Sindhu Gangadharan. Sindhu has been on this platform multiple times. She's the managing director of SAP Labs India. SAP Labs India is the largest R&D center outside of SAP headquarters in Germany and is a leading hub of innovation and hotspot for talent and diversity. Sindhu started her career at SAP Labs India as a young software developer, and she's rose through the ranks, navigated several leadership roles to become the first woman to lead SAP Labs India. She was recently given the additional role at SAP of heading its Global Customer Innovation Service. She's also the Vice Chairperson of nasscom. Welcome, Sindhu.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Thanks, Sindhu. Those of you who are viewing this can send in their questions to the Facebook comment box. Sujit and I will put them to Veda, Lalitha, and Sindhu. Coming to you, Lalitha, if we are looking at leadership pathways, what are the specific strategies GCCs are implementing to create accessible pathways for women to rise to leadership positions?
So when you talk about pathways, Shilpa, I don't think pathways is anything different specifically for women. Yeah, it's an equal opportunity for both technical ladder and management ladder for both men and women, but it's also about fueling the drive and assuring women that whatever path they choose, that we are here as an organization to support them, right? It's all about identifying the right diversity talent, building the pipeline, mentoring, enhancing the skills to help them to take up new challenges, encouraging them for that. And also for this, we need to measure the outcomes and experiences and use essentially to data to fix the trouble spots. It's important that we as organizations find the data insights that will improve the women's experience in the workplace, so that we create the equal opportunities for people. Data tracking is valuable only when it leads to a change, right? So it's absolutely essential for us to encourage women in technical careers as well. For example, in Jaguar Land Rover, we have a DEI network that is for women in engineering and allies. So objective is to promote, facilitate a gender inclusive environment within engineering, such as everyone has the equal enjoyable opportunities and the career in the organizations. So I don't think the pathways are different. It is about how do we enable it for women that could be different.
Veda, you want to add to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I absolutely share Lalitha's perspective on this as well. It's about building an inclusive culture. It's about finding the right talent in the right place at the right time. But I think the other piece is that it's interesting because we're here in India. Sometimes we look and we think that our gender imbalance is an Indian phenomenon, and it's not. I mean, if we look at and this is the same for many of us, when we look across our global enterprise, we've got the same type of makeup starting at the, from the entry level all the way up to the top, where we've got a diminishing return of gender balance as we go up to the top. But I think that's not an India unique perspective. So while we have, as well as all of us forward-looking organizations do, we have a strong DE&I network, employee resource groups, diversity and equity officers that we have that are focused on this. I think what we want to make sure is that we're plugged into what is being done around the world, so that we are bringing those same opportunities, those same learnings, that same perspective to our folks here in our GCCs, which, let's face it, our GCCs are now, anywhere between 20 and 30% of our global footprint. So what we do around the world has to be echoed in the GCC as well.
Yeah, and maybe to add to what Lalitha and Veda already said, right? Indeed, I fully buy into what you said, Lalitha, that it's has to be an inclusive culture, right? I mean, it has to be pathways that people pursue based on their passion, their desire, and what they love to do. But at the same time, I think to Veda's point, right, I think it's very important to also have structured career development programs that also tailor to that needs and aspirations, right? What individuals have, particularly also for women, I'd say, right? I mean, we should have that very structured career development programs that cater to their very specific needs and aspirations. Because many times, if I just put on my SAP hat, we have this Women to Watch program, right? And the idea with the Women to Watch program is to very early on develop a leadership pipeline within the organization through mentorship, through targeted training. Because today, what we have 34% of our organization are women, but our target is to get to 50%, right? So we're really going to keep pushing the boundaries, and we've definitely made significant progress. And at the same time, I'd also say data, which was also mentioned. If I give you one concrete data point again, right? From a very early study several years back, we saw that the attrition rate among women after having their second child, right, was very high, in double-digit numbers. And when we went into the root cause and investigated and realized that it was primarily because of lack of childcare support. So, and that also resulted in actually our in-house childcare center, which again, so the data and doing something about it, and of course, young parents can be both men or women, but I'm just saying it, for majority of the cases, impacts women, and to take action based on the data is also super important. Then I'd say also sponsorship is important, right? Senior leaders need to actively advocate and mentor for high potential women because they need to be given those opportunities, the visibility, so that they can aspire, and two, when roles come up, they can also take on those challenging roles. So all in all, I'd say that transparency is very important, and using data and kind of driving some of those outcomes becomes very important.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of your childcare center, the phenomenal. I mean, I've not seen it actually, but from what I've seen of pictures, I mean, beautiful setups many of you have now in your centers, isn't it? I'm sure women use it a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, there's saplings, which I was referring to, is right on the campus, right? And so women use it, young men use it too. I mean, it doesn't have to be young parents, let's put it that way. And it makes it so much more easier, especially nursing mothers and all of, they can still continue work. They just step out. And so it works beautifully, I have to say.
Yeah. You mentioned mentorship as well. I mean, that's something that I hear a lot. We have a column that is meant for, career advice for women and all that. And almost uniformly, everybody mentions mentorship as a huge thing. Give us an idea, mentorship and sponsorship programs in advancing women's careers. How important are these? I mean,
Very important, Sujit, because mentorship and sponsorship programs are, I would say, game changers, and I'm sure Lalitha and Veda would agree to that as well. Because I mean, if you're talking about advancing women's careers, becomes super important that you also pair experienced leaders with high potential women, right? And it really helps where you have also clear objectives, where you can track progress. Whereas sponsorship, I think, even goes a step further, right? Where we have senior leaders, and when you talk about sponsorship, it's not, you don't say, I'm going to sponsor 10 women. No, that doesn't happen that way, right? Sponsors actually kind of find you, right? And then sponsor you but for sponsors to find you, you need to be in those roles. You need
What's
to
the
have
difference? What do the sponsors do?
Well, sponsors speak for you when you're not in the room, right? Speak in those boardrooms to really say, hey, I'd like to have Sindhu in that project, right? Whereas a mentor, you work with the mentor. You kind of work, you refine the way how you learn about things or get the visibility, or you use them as a sounding board. You have multiple diverse mentors who support you. Can be even people from completely different organizations, but sponsors are within your organization. But in certain roles, sponsors even are outside the organization, sitting in a common board, for example, right? So both of these become super important, but I'm sure others have.
Yeah. So Sindhu, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think some of the times we don't even know who our sponsors are, right? Because they're advocates for us. They're the people who have seen, and whether that's me sponsoring for someone else or someone sponsoring for me, it's because we've seen something in that person that we want to highlight. We see that value and we want to spotlight that. And so sometimes there are a few people who don't know that I sponsor them, that I advocate for them in the closed door. And I recently found out that there was someone in Ireland that was sponsoring for me, which I just found that very interesting because it wasn't something that I knew. Whereas to Sindhu's point, the mentorship is more of that partnership, shared experiences. And so you always know who your mentor or your mentee is. So I think from that perspective, they are very different. And I think while we can, and we do, I think all of us do, have very targeted mentorship programs. I think, Sujit, from my perspective, they're key because when you look at the three of us, we're all coming in very, very historically male-dominated environments, right? Whether it's automotive, technology, financial services. And so while I think this is a phenomenal panel that you've put together, we're also a little bit of a unicorn in some ways. So I think these structured programs take the learnings that we've benefited from, the strides that we've taken, and institutionalize it so we can help that next wave coming through. And I think that's what's really important for us to be able to continue the momentum forward.
Yeah, I think the only point which I will add to what Sindhu and Veda already said, Sujit, is especially in a GCC kind of an environment, it is important for us as an organization to identify sponsors for the top talent, probably who's sitting here in the headquarters, because where they have visibility probably a tad bit more higher. Sponsors really need to, and also you need to pick the sponsors who have a good understanding of how the talent in the GCC operates and have that willingness to be the spokesperson and promote that agenda in the headquarters who has a seat at the table, right? Because otherwise, but of course, now the tables are turning. We have more global roles moving to India. No, location is no longer the criteria for where your sponsor is going to be located, but do the sponsors have the seat at the table? Do they have the visibility for these stretch opportunities? Becomes pretty essential aspect of it. But when it comes to mentorship, what I see in working is best to encourage mentorship from more successful women leaders who are probably around you, right? Because it's important to foster a sense of belonging and community kind of a feeling to reduce that stress. And more often than not, a lot of problems are not as unique as women assume them to be, right? It is, a lot of us have faced it, a lot of us have overcome. We had the similar kind of roadblock. We have overcome that. We have broken some glass ceilings. So it's about how do you take those learnings and how do you maneuver those situations and move forward, either it is in your career or life. So mentors has to be more closer to you, local to you, people who have gone through this path and journey, and sponsors are the ones who should be having the seat at the table, in my opinion.
Do your companies tell women employees to find mentors? Do you tell them, and how many of them then try to do that?
Well,
most of the,
yeah. Sorry, Lalitha. I think we encourage everyone to find mentors. I don't think that this is unique to just women. That's number one. But I think one of the other things that we also do is we actually encourage people to find a mentor who's not the same as them, because you want so while there are absolutely learnings that I can take from a woman that's gone ahead of me and she's, you know, raised children while having a career, and I can learn a lot from what she's done and how she's done it, I can also learn a lot from the perspective of someone who isn't in my same place. And that could be a woman who's never gotten married and never had children. That could be a man, or that could be someone anywhere on the gender spectrum that's different than me. And what I can do is I can learn about a different perspective too. So I think the mentoring program, we encourage everyone to do it. And we do
Veda is frozen,
no? Say that we will do a little bit more hand holding maybe through some of that process, where we want to make sure that we're nurturing some of that talent that might not organically grow on its own. So I think I would say that we're not forcing women, or we're not looking at, you know, trying to get it's not a numbers game, but it is absolutely trying to find that talent in whatever size, shape, or form it might be in, that needs additional help, and surrounding them and nurturing them in different ways, including mentoring.
Okay. I just want to stay on this topic of sponsorship. Again, can that be, do you structure it? Do you tell senior leaders that you must become sponsors of some employees and all that? Do you do that? How does that work? All of you are muted.
We tell senior leaders, and but like I said, sponsors will identify. It's not that it's a matchmaking, right? Like it never happens that way. And sometimes a board member has maybe one sponsor or two max, right? So it's really to elevate you to different levels, right?
Okay, but everyone is kind of expected.
No, mentorship is a lot more structured, John, Sujit, than sponsorship. Sponsorship is, something has to work out. And we can only nudge the senior leaders. We can only nudge them and tell them, hey, have you looked at so-and-so? Have you considered, if you have a stretch assignment, would you want to consider so-and-so? And that kind of just bringing them to the table together, then it's a structured program, Sujit.
Yeah, I think sponsorship also is built on trust, right? You've already proven somebody knows you. You've always been somebody who delivers, diligent, and that's built over time. It's not some matching of people.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree, it's not matchmaking. It has to happen. It's got to be done through proven delivery and performance. One of the things that we can do is we can encourage senior leaders to say sponsorship is something that's very important for us to build future leaders, so that they become aware of the folks that are coming up in the organization, and they can find those people that they want to sponsor because they know it's the right thing for the organization. So I think that's how we would kind of encourage sponsorship, would be educating people on the benefits of finding and sponsoring someone.
Okay. Shilpa, I just wanted to ask this other thing on mentorship. So when you structure mentorship, you ask the mentor to spend a certain amount of time. How does it work? Do you structure some of those things that in a month you must spend this much time, anything like that? Any of you? I don't know. How do these the process
it's very much
exactly
a
work?
structured program, Sujit. So we actually list out the people who are seeking mentors. So there's a mentorship program. I'm just talking about SAP now. And we also train the mentors, right? Because mentors also need to conduct the conversations with clear goals and outcomes. Because a mentee also needs to be prepared to go in there and say, hey, what do I want to achieve out of this conversation and this relationship? What is the, and so to come prepared, it's not just, oh, let's go for a coffee kind of a conversation. That's also good. Of course, we can do that. But so that, yes, training for mentors is very important, right? And so that you can effectively guide and support your mentees. And that's crucial, because many times it's also important, right? As mentors, you also need to have training on unconscious bias, active listening, right? And also providing constructive feedback. That person is seeking for input, right? It's not about saying, oh, it's all great. So indeed, and that is important. And also we integrate these programs with overall talent management, succession planning processes to make sure that it's aligned with our overall diversity and inclusion goals as well. So there is larger organizational outcomes as well that we are trying to achieve with these very structured programs, no?
Yeah, it's usually structured, and more often than not, the people chapter or the HR is kind of setting the construct and guidelines and monitoring once in a while, if I can say so. Yeah.
Yes, and we do the same. It's structured, and we almost do a little bit, when we talked about sponsorship isn't matchmaking, mentorship is. So I'll put in that I want to learn more about cyber, or I want to learn more about fraud. And mentors will put in things that they're really good at and they can mentor with. So we do a bit of a matchmaking. And one of the things, while we absolutely do the same thing at Northern Trust, where we train our mentors, we also do let people know it's the mentee that drives that relationship. So as a mentor, if I'm being mentored or I'm mentoring someone, there's a certain amount of hours and time that you say that you're going to commit to that relationship. But as far as driving the agenda when we meet, setting up the meetings, we put that in the hands of the mentee, because we believe that each person owns their own career, owns their own career path, and therefore it is them that needs to drive their own journey forward.
So how many women come forward to be, asking for a mentor? Is it still a small proportion, or?
No, several hundreds.
Really?
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
And in fact, I think mentors are not just for women, right? I think that was already said.
Yeah.
Everybody
Okay.
needs to
I'm
seek
sure.
mentors. Because it's also a brilliant way to learn from another person's experience, right? And it can be similar, it can be, or rather it should be very diverse as well, because then you get a totally different perspective. So having also a diverse set of mentors is something that I always encourage, and I also have.
Well, and you know what, Sindhu, that's a really important point that you made, because people are always surprised that, you know, the level that we're at right now, the amount of years of experience that we have, where we've gotten to in our organizations. And when I tell people that, yeah, I have 3 or 4 sponsors at any given time, and I am, you know, connecting with my mentors and my sponsors, they don't, they seem, sometimes people think you hit a certain level and you don't need it anymore, which I find is also quite interesting. So I'm glad that you brought that up as well.
Interesting.
We get to hear of many organizations who are chasing a diversity ratio. They've called it out, 2025 goals, 2030, whatever be it. But there's a structured roadmap that they've all called out. So I just wanted to hear from each one of your experiences. One, in your own companies, how are you really reviewing these across levels? It can be the junior, mid, and senior level, and successfully elevated each one of them, handheld them to really see them through to the next journey. And what are some of the cultural challenges that you've seen when it comes to, you know, some of the women leaders, aspiring women leaders, you know, that they've expressed to you individually?
You'll have to pick a speaker, else we all start speaking at the same time.
So you can go first, yeah, then yeah, and others.
No, you talked about cultural barriers, right? I mean, if I just look at the demographics first, right, Shilpa, today what India has 1,022 women for every 1,000 men in the country, right? So I think fundamentally every business has understood that we cannot progress as a business or even as nations without 50% of our population or workforce. It's as simple as that. It becomes a business imperative, right? First of all, so it's not just about, hey, how do we monitor the numbers and get, but every business has realized that that's what it needs. But if you just look at India again, India is clearly topping the world when we talk about highest number of female STEM graduates, 43%, right? But again, when you look at the same numbers, when it comes to employing them, we rank at the 19th position. So which means there is structural changes that need to happen, and everybody, like I said, understands that that kind of, if you're looking at progress on multiple fronts, it can't happen without women. So if you look at some of the challenges, right, we lose brilliant, particularly in the mid-career level, technologists and leaders, many times to some unfair practices at work, like I said earlier, unconscious bias, a lack of equal opportunity, and hence, I'll reiterate what I said earlier, we need to tackle this through regular training sessions, right? And training for I mean, we talked about training in the context of mentors, but also on unconscious bias. We need to have the gender sensitivity for all employees, right? At all levels, including the leadership levels, right? And raising awareness as well about biases, and also having that as one of the key points when you talk about decision making is very key. So which means it translates to also making sure that you're reviewing and updating your organizational policies to be also very inclusive and also supportive for women, right? Be it pay policies, maternity or paternity leave, flexible work arrangements, anti-harassment measures, all of this I think it's a given, right? It's expected and has to be in place. Top down as well, that leadership commitment is also crucial, right? Because many times it has to be the voice from the top, because leaders who come out there and promote and talk about diversity and inclusion initiatives also hold themselves accountable for progress, right? And so people know, hey, this is an organization I want to be part of, and there's a clear focus, right? So that I think is very important. And what we've also done is a lot of these what we call as networks, so employee resource groups, and also giving a platform for women to also connect to also what you mentioned, Lalitha, earlier on, right? People who've gone through a similar path. So we have Business Women's Network as one example that immediately comes to my mind, where you really have women with come together, support each other, and also have successful women leaders come in, role modeling as well, demonstrating also how that leadership positions are attainable, right? And then, like I said, having very concrete, looking at the data and implementing concretely some of the things that you need to have in place, be it on-site childcare or having wellness programs, all of this becomes super important. And then going back and also regularly monitoring and reporting on many of the metrics, right? Because people know, hey, okay, that's what the data is showing, which means we need to do more, and so that those gaps can also be addressed. So it's really a collective of all of this, I'd say, so that if there are, like many times when I talked about unconscious bias, just because a woman is at a midpoint of her career, taking on a role in a different country, you don't need to assume, hey, she might not be able to travel or whatever it is, right? So that's what I mean by it's very important that you take the decision based on the business, nothing about the individual. That's for the individual to come back and say if she or he is able to do it, right? So I think it's very much ingrained into the core culture of the organization, right? So, yeah.
I think I'll only add to what you said, Sindhu. If you can't see it, you can't be it, right? So that's the reason why role models become so much more important. But I think, to this point, essentially, just by the nature of working in a GCC, we always have a culture mix, right? It's about creating the right mix of representing the headquarters brand identity, corporate philosophy, while looking into the country where the GCC is based and celebrating the local culture and differences. So by design, most GCCs are heterogeneous, and it could be because of the countries they're operating, your stakeholders are global. So there is certain level of diversity that already exists from the business itself, right? And that, because of that, we are probably able to create some of these policies about the flexibility we can bring into work based on the different time zones. It could be things in terms of the inclusivity, essentially the kind of policies that will help us. That is the kind of the things which people get benefited from, the dismantling the traditional barriers that may have impeded women for participating in the past, right? So adopting the flexible work environment is not just contributes to a more diverse workforce, but also it could be a heightened level of engagement among the talent, both for men and women. It's not necessarily just a women thing, but whoever needs flexibility, we are able to create that kind of flexibility, different time zone working, and a lot of these things as a part of policies that helps us.
Yeah, and I think, just going back to your original question about, the gender mix and is it targeted? I think all of us, and you probably heard this come out in a lot of different ways, we are looking at equal opportunity. And so when it comes to hiring, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that we get an diverse slate of candidates. And then to address the concern that Sindhu had raised as well, we make sure that our interview panel is diverse as well. So anytime I see Lalitha, you're doing the exact same thing. So a lot of those things, because we know we're human beings, we are going to have bias. We will have affinity biases and be attracted to people who are more like us. So we need to make sure that we have panels that are diverse, making sure that we are demanding, and we demand this from our talent acquisition team, that they provide us with a diverse slate of candidates. And I think from that perspective is how we want to make sure that we are doing the right thing for the organization, getting the right talent, and not basing that on a gender preference one way or the other. I think a couple other really quick things that we do, and again, I am sure Lalitha and Sindhu, you do these things as well, is throughout the year, whenever we're going into a performance cycle or the increase cycle, we take a look at our entire database. We look across levels, we look across genders, and we make sure that from that perspective, when we're looking at, like, I'm not going to look at, 8,000 people's, performance rating, but when I take the step back and we take a look at what is happening at each level, we also want to make sure that we've got equal balance and proper representation of people being promoted and the ratings that they're getting as well. And we've got the right representation of that population. And I think that's something that we do at Northern. And it's not an easy exercise. It is quite onerous to do, but it's important. And because everyone knows that we do it as well, I think there's a certain amount, Sindhu, as you were saying earlier, there's a certain amount of trust that comes with those types of practices as well.
Yeah, right. I mean, just that, we were looking at the change in the reporting structure, especially after Black Lives Matter. We really saw disclosures around leaders who made it from those communities. So we were just wondering as to, from a media standpoint, India is the growth engine for many companies, and the disclosures are still not there. It still has to evolve to call out India as an integral part of the journey and also disclose diversity ratios. We've not seen that happen yet. Hopefully it should happen in the future.
Well, it's interesting though.
Well, as individual organizations, we are out there, right? With our data. It's out there for everybody to look at it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just about to say the same thing. I think whenever we're having a due diligence visit, we have clients coming in and visiting us. That's probably one of the metrics that they like to look at as well, to understand what are we doing as an organization. And so it is a very open conversation that we have. We talk about it at our all partners. Northern Trust employees are called partners. So at our all partner town halls, we also we talk openly about it as well.
Specifically at Jailer also, we track this, and internally we have a network called Reach, Rate, Ethnicity, Diversity, all kind of diverse angles. We look at it globally, not just here, right? So we definitely do focus on it.
Shilpa was asking, do you set targets and then you try to see whether you meet those targets and all that? Do you do that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Usually gender diversity ratio, definitely there are targets, Sujat. At every organization, there are targets.
Yeah. Correct.
Because you want to improve what you can't measure, right?
Sure.
So that's so important that you need to have the targets.
Yeah, and we've seen the math, right? So just like we were talking about what the overall population is like and what the graduate composition is like, but yet in GCCs, 1.9 million employees in GCCs and only 5 lakh women. So we've got some work to do. And if we're not purposeful about it, if we're not intentional about it, we're not going to make progress.
So what is the big stumbling block there, you think?
But the biggest thing is in terms of the number of women who are in STEM, right? It is, if you look at, for us especially, if you look at recruiting from Ivy League kind of universities for engineering graduates, there are only at about 10-11% women. That becomes the biggest barrier for us in taking the equal 50-50%. So I think the change has to start much deep-rooted and try to bring the inclusion ratio. Even if you don't look at just Ivy League, even if the engineering, if you look at, I think the numbers are something around 28.7% women in the engineering courses.
Is
right?
it?
So,
overall, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I think it is, we still have a lot of work to do in that area. Because if you don't have it,
the IITs are really low. I think they're also trying to improve it. But
IITs is really,
even
really
below
low.
that, you're saying the numbers are.
Yeah, it's around 30 to 40% sometimes. It depends on the year that you look at, but it's not definitely at 50%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think what we're all saying, Sujit, is we are we are as we're bringing people into the organization, especially at that entry level, we try to get as close to 50-50 as we can. Then we know in any country, there's leakage as you go up the hierarchy.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
so all of us are putting programs in place to try and stem that leakage. I think that's probably because what you don't want to do is you don't want to get a perspective of tokenism, because that's the backlash that can happen at times as well. So if you're hiring at equal opportunity, you are providing people the equal opportunities, equal training, equal access to mentors, equal access to stretch assignments, then that will naturally create hopefully the same type of proportion as you go up. But then it's things like, and I love the term saplings. Oh my gosh, that is such a fantastic term. But when it's doing programs like that help our young parents to continue with their careers. And so I think if we're doing all of those things, it will organically happen, and also purposely, because we are focused, right? Just like Lalitha said, you measure what you want to improve.
Marriage and kids, I imagine, are the biggest reasons when they fall off. I mean, what are the best strategies there, you think, to keep them, even if with a break or whatever? What are the strategies that have worked best for you?
Well, for us, we provide daycare. Doesn't matter. Again, it's gender neutral. That we do provide daycare, and while I do love the fact of having a daycare on site in the building, we have them in our tech parks, and the tech parks that we're in. So what we've done is we've done tie-ups with those tech parks, but to give some people flexibility, because some people don't want to commute with their child, right? So some people don't want to have to do that. Or if they're working from home, they still want to put their child into daycare. So we give them the flexibility for daycare where they would like, and we provide coverage for that.
Lalitha, Sindhu, what are the best strategies for you?
Many. It depends on where women are in their career as well, right? And maybe I'll call out one thing which where the leakage, because we talked about leakage earlier on, right? So we have this SAP returnship program. It's a program which is also it's made it to a Harvard case study. All of that, our D&I practices at SAP in general, a Harvard case study. And the returnship program particularly is targeting women, so that for various reasons, be it for caregiving or childcare, whatever it is, when women take a longer break, right? So it's a very structured program where there is ways where you don't need to, of course, do your regular work, but still have that intermediate times in a week where you connect with the team. There's a person who's always there to work with you, and it's just keeping you abreast of everything that's happening at work. So because there's a lot of anxiety on both sides, right? So it's not just for it's also when you have a high potential who's on the break, there's anxiety on the employer's side as well, that we want to retain that person and make sure that the person feels absolutely comfortable during that break to come back fully empowered to take on the role, right? Whatever. And that's particularly targeted in this case for our women, right? So the returnship program in this case is actually only for women, I have to admit, because we saw again from the data that's where we tend to, and these are high performing women who we definitely want to make sure that they come back, right? Because many times it's people are passionate about topics. They don't necessarily are at the workplace just for the compensation or anything, right? So, and we want that kind of passionate people to be back. Of course, pay equity and all that is definitely something that is a baseline. But I'd also say few things which we shouldn't underplay is also when we talk about retaining talent, regularly also having a culture of acknowledging contributions, be it through formal processes or simple shout outs. I mean, that's a culture, and I'm sure all of us do that. Because many times it's also about boosting the morale and encouraging that long-term commitment to the organization, right? Because making people, I think in general, if you show people that they're appreciated, they're seen, you recognize what they're doing, I think goes a very long way, very, very long way.
Totally.
Yeah, I think the only point which I would add there to what Sindhu and Veda already said is, somewhere we need to disassociate the age factor in terms of, especially when women take a break, right? Because if you look at it, when they start the careers, if they choose to take a break in between, and when they come back to work, where you look at somebody with 15 years of experience, a man, and the kind of the roles they've done, and the 15 years of experience of a woman, the kind of the roles. So somewhere there is a age bias that creeps in. It's all part of our unconscious bias, right? So I think we somewhere need to separate the age angle and look at women's ability to take on a leadership role, either younger or older, right? As long as they fit the requirements, do we have as an organization the ability to disassociate the age bias and the experience biases and look at people for that role? So, as Sindhu is adding in terms of from a challenges perspective, a lot of it's also about encouraging the women to just stay put, right? It is so easy to give up. So it's about telling them that it's okay, we're all here with all the flexibility, keeping that excitement going, keeping that the fire, what I've talked about earlier, in terms of giving that confidence. And that is the reason why what Sindhu said makes a lot of sense in terms of giving that opportunities, giving that sponsorship, and proactive approach for that is very, very important.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I think I would add to that is just like Lalitha was saying, every organization is slightly different, right? Everybody's like, just like every person has their own personality, culture is the personality of an organization. And so I think one of the things that each of us also do is we listen to what our teams are saying. So I'm sure we're not alone. Northern Trust isn't alone in this. We do an engagement survey. We send this out. We slice and dice it so we can look and we can see what are people at different generations thinking, what are people at different levels in the organization thinking, what are people of different genders thinking. And one of the things that we've done is we did look and we saw that last year that we did get some lower scores in certain buckets of from women, where there were a lot of different things that we did, but this one cut, the action that we took was that there were two different buckets of women who felt like their careers weren't being nurtured as much as they would like. So we put in for senior women and for that budding manager, we put in a special focus program to help them through that next phase of their career as well. So I think all of us are doing that in different ways because we're all different organizations as well. So listening to our folks, doing what's right for us. And while there's some best practices that all of us are doing, I think we also just need to recognize that it needs to be tailored for every different organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Shilpa?
Yeah. When you look at culture, do you think with employees coming back to work, it's easier not only to engage them, also to sensitize them culturally? Because an online first experience, it was very different. So many of them had really not stepped into offices. They're already 3-4 years old, and the entire mix would have changed. So I just wanted to hear from each one of you as to, do you think a hybrid model helps you, integrate them better culturally? Lalitha, you want to go first?
It does, right? I think a lot of the times what I've seen in my career is how much ever you do classroom trainings or just online trainings in sensitization or unconscious bias, it really never hits home as much as you do a role play or put people, give them scenarios, make them sit together, promote a kind of a dialogue, if I can say so, in a room, right? That is the one, especially when it comes to subjects like diversity related topics and sensitization. All of this, it is best done in a physical environment, Shilpa. So returning to work or the hybrid work environment where we do this workshop and the other stuff in person definitely would help much better in integration.
Yes, so we very quickly pivoted to, so we did our, we're hybrid as well. All of our new employee onboarding, we do in person, also for the fact that they can come in and they pick up their laptop and get themselves all set up. But I think to your point, Shilpa, culture isn't something that you can teach. It's almost something that you have to feel and live and experience. And so for the new people who are joining an organization, I do believe that them coming in and spending that time with their managers, their teams, and maybe it's not their whole team all the time because we're all hybrid, so it's going to be moving and shifting a little bit. But we always just make sure that we've got management on the ground for that team all the time for people who are new coming in so that they can experience it. Because Lalitha's absolutely right. That's not something you can teach. You've got to live it.
Yeah, I think all said, right? Because when you look at some of the key skills, strategic thinking, negotiation, executive presence, I mean, you have to live it, right? You don't sit in a classroom and learn. Of course, continuous learning as an organizational culture is something we all instill and drive. And for continuous learning, of course, we use online tools and all of that. But for some of the topics we are talking about here, you have to live it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the best learning, honestly, I think the best learning is if I'm sitting and I can overhear Sindhu and Lalitha's conversation, I'm learning something about how do you present yourself? How do you present your case? How do you interact with other people? Those are the types of things that you can't learn watching your screen.
Intangible.
And it's that, to your point, Lalitha, it's that experiential learning that
Absolutely.
we provide in office that I think is important to developing the culture.
Absolutely. On this point of unconscious bias that all of you spoke about, give us as a man, I think I'm not biased, but I'm sure it probably gets reflected in some ways or the other. Give us an idea how widespread do you think, especially among men and all that, this unconscious bias or conscious bias? How widespread is it in your organization?
Let me just say, Sujat, it's not men, it is even women.
Even
right?
women.
It's every one of us, all of
Everyone.
us have unconscious bias.
Yes.
And it is one of the biggest barriers, in my opinion, is the unconscious bias. And as much as you invest and do the trainings on it, it's never going to be enough. It's a constant learning. It's a years of DNA coding for us, right? It is definitely it's generations of DNA coding that has to change, and it can only be done where you hammer it again and again and again and show examples, call out on people, tell them this is how what they are showing is bias. And I would also say that even we have unconscious bias, right? So it's not a man or women thing. It is there and it's very deep.
Yeah, I really, what Sindhu, something you said earlier really resonated with me because I found myself falling prey to this. When a woman returns back from maternity leave, do I think about, oh, well, that job, it's really demanding, or that job sometimes really requires stretching into the night, or that job requires a lot of travel. And so I hesitate, and sometimes I don't even offer her that as an option when, I mean, and shame on us, right? Because we're making choices on our perceptions as opposed to her choice. And so I think, and we think we're being compassionate and empathetic, and, you know, we're not going to, But I just think that that's the wrong thing to do. Put it all out there and let that person decide the choice for them. That's and so I completely agree with you, Lalitha. We all I know I have it. I have to completely I have to challenge myself daily to try and
your
challenge
mentors will have it too. I can, if you
Absolutely.
just if I get half a minute, right? One of my most trusted mentors, I won't quote the person, of course, but who I would always go for. I mean, still go, but there was this one role that I was considering taking, right? And actually, where I just wanted my mentor to tell me, "Go for it, you can do it," right? That's what I was expecting, and he told me, "Oh, you need to think about the work-life balance." You know, and I was like, "Wow!" I mean,
the only thing which I tell the people I work with is, please don't ever assume. How much of a basic it is, how much of an apparent obvious it is, please ask. Give her the choice, right? I think that is my tagline always is, give her the choice. You know, however obvious, please ask, right? That's the only way to figure it out.
Yeah, very
And
true.
which is, there is no right and wrong things, right? Because everything is very different for individuals. There are people who would want to take aggressive roles, people who would want to come back, who would want to go there, and there are people who would want to take it light, who want to focus. So there is nothing always a right or wrong thing. It's about what does she want, and are we enabling that, whether it's lighter, higher, short term, long term, it's okay, right? It's about asking for it and providing what the women want.
Absolutely, give her the choice. Yeah, Sindhu, I guess that mentor would not have said the same thing to a man. I guess. No
I'm
chance.
sure.
that's
I'm
what
sure. I've had.
I would rarely doubt men telling each other, think about your work-life balance.
No, very true. Shilpa, anything? No, we covered quite a bit.
Quite a bit. And also, if you can give us some examples of global leaders, women leaders sitting out of offices in India, getting a direct face time with the boards and managements. So if you can help us understand, has that funnel grown, and is there a conscious tracking mechanism so that there are more visible examples of leaders?
I think.
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay.
No, please, please.
I can only talk about it, Shilpa, it is a lot of unlearning and relearning, right? Because especially as global women leaders, when you're sitting out of India and managing teams at different regions, for me, I had to, we all think we speak English, but we all speak very different English. What it means in one culture could be very, very different in what it means in other cultures. So it's a lot of unlearning, relearning for sure. So visibility to board and other stuff, definitely it all helps us to bring the diverse decision making, which will help us to grow the teams, right? And globally. So that's all I would say.
Yeah, I know we are almost out of time. Just your last messages to young women in your companies and in GCCs in general, in India in general. I mean, any last message that you want to say?
Yeah, I'd just say not to have any mental blocks about your abilities, right? Give it your all. Go behind what you truly, passionate about. But not to forget, put in your hard work. There's no compensation for the hard work. Passion alone won't kill it.
I always said one of the most important thing for women to be successful is guilt management. It's about, we're always prone to guilt trips. Whatever we choose, we are guilty, right? Whether we choose to be at home, we are guilty. We choose to be at work, we're guilty. So it's guilt management is one of the most important aspects that one needs to manage. And whatever choices you make, be okay with your choices, right? I think that's the only key mantra that I have.
Yeah, and I think related to that, Lalitha, that what you said and Sindhu, it resonated with me. I would say the one thing that I say to young women is absolutely they're your choices, and you need to understand the benefits of those choices and the cost of those choices as well. And the other, so while we want to be able to say you can have it all, absolutely you can have it all. You might not be able to have it all at the same time. And so being able to have that balance and know that sometimes I might have to put my parents in front of my career. I might have to put my children in front of my career. And knowing that that's okay, because that's my choice, and being good with that, and know that when I'm ready to come back and when you're ready to come back as a young woman, then that all that experience that you have will be able to continue your career forward.
Absolutely. Fascinating discussion. I often tell people GCCs are the gold standard in a number of in the Indian corporate industry in general. I mean, you just recently read about stories of a global factory company which refused to hire married women or all that. I mean, in that context, GCCs really are the gold standard in a number of areas, and especially in HR, I think you've been a gold standard. But like all of you said, there's much yet to be done. And all of you gave us some excellent ways in which women can become 50% of all our organizations. So thanks so much for a great discussion, Sindhu, Lalitha, Veda. It's been really a pleasure having you, and great stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think I've enjoyed as much as talking to everybody else. It felt like a friends at a table cribbing about things, right? Sometimes it's wonderful. Thank you so much.